Hey everybody, welcome to another episode. Welcome back to the Yours Show. I have a camera video now, face reveal, I guess, guys. I spent a lot of time yesterday after filming the chapter 1 of 1984, and I spent a lot of time playing around with, does this look like crap? It kind of looks like crap. I have my JROTC awards in the background. I have the freaking, I just cussed in the first 3 minutes. Oh no, my monetization. But I got the camera or the candle for background color because I was told that's something you're supposed to do. I have my monitors. I just have a file explorer pulled up because it's just white. So there's light coming from there. Maybe I don't know. I'll play around with lighting more. And I have a floor lamp. Where I have a desk lamp, but it's on the floor to kind of provide background light, and I have a headlamp at 45 degrees to me, because that's what I was told by the internet is good, because it's supposed to make you look better. I don't believe that. I think I'm already, as sexy as can be. I'm the best looking guy ever without any kind of halo effect. But yeah, and I have the beach towel put up right over here because there's an alcove in the wall where I have a printer and crap in it. It doesn't look good in the background, so I put a blanket up, and there's a big red bottle of Big Red right there to weigh it down. so it looks better. But so I think this is a fairly fine setup, honestly. We're gonna see how long the battery in that headlamp lasts. That's kind of the point of the day. And I'm kind of quiet. I'm kind of in a hushed voice because it's 11:45 right now. I have school in the morning. So we're gonna try and we're not gonna rush it. I'm not gonna rush it. I took a long nap today, so we're chilling. All right. Today we're gonna get into Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I still have the price tag on it. I got it for $6.95. This one I read already earlier this year. I think it was the last book I read before Ruby Ridge. I have my book stack right there, all the books I've read in the year, and right now there's 4. There's 4 stacked there because I had to take this one off. So you can tell I'm a prolific reader, eh? But that's kind of why I wanted to get into this. Like I mentioned, to kind of help myself read, give myself a block of time to just sit and read, with the hope I might make money off this one day. So we're reading Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This is another classic I hear referenced a fair amount. I hear you don't really hear it too much coming from the left wing, because this is a book that's about left wingers. Literally, the whole premise of the book is it's a society where you get to fulfill all your carnal desires, but there's no true liberty there. It's all freedom, no liberty. And of course they're not gonna mention that because that's what they're doing. That's their whole party platform is freedom over liberty, and it's a disgrace to say the least. The leftists always mention 1984. It's 1984. You hear them do that all the time. I don't know how many of them have read 1984. But Michael Knowles is where I heard of this book first. He references it a lot. I think Matt Walsh references it every now and then. But this is definitely a book. Oh, another thing. If you notice, I came up with a nice name for this series. It's called the Polity Pages. Welcome to the first official episode of the Polity Pages, because it wasn't the Polity Pages yesterday. I texted a friend of mine she's a little more artistic minded, and I was like, I'm starting a new podcast where I read books that are prevalent in the political sphere, in polity, and I was like, I think I'm gonna call it the Books of Polity. And she's like, how about you call it the Polity Pages? And I'm like, that's kind of fire. You're kind of a genius. So we're here with the Polity Pages, and I actually really like that name. I think one day if we ever get any kind of recognition, I could have a shirt that just says PP on it, because I'm a child Literally. Well, not literally, dude. I'm an adult now, man. We be rocking and stuff. So, Brave New World. There's a paragraph of biography on the back, and I feel like I should read that because I kind of did George Orwell a disservice yesterday in what I said about him. It was not well researched, to say the least. So let's give this a read. Who was Aldous Huxley? Aldous Huxley, 1894 to 1963, is the author of the classic novels Island, Eyeless in Gaza, and The Genius and the Goddess, as well as such critically acclaimed non-fiction works as The Perennial Philosophy, The Doors of Perception, and The Devils of London. Devils of Loudon. Yeah, another thing. This setup, I don't have my big overhead light on, so reading's a little harder. Devils of Loudon. Born in Surrey, England, so we have another English author, so I get to read color with a U. And educated at Oxford, he died in Los Angeles, California. So he's a very worldly man. 1894 to 1963. He was like, what does that make him? He was 69 when he died. Nice. So he saw World War II. He saw World War One. He saw the American Great Depression. I don't know if he was in America when that happened, but the American Great Depression, it affected everyone globally. That's kind of why Germany got into World War II, is because of the German Great Depression and the Wehrmacht period. Is it the Wehrmacht period, or is it the I don't know, the Wehrmacht Republic? I want to say the Wehrmacht Republic. It might be something else. It's been a while since I've read about it, but you get just squalor and destitution, and so this guy saw it. Basically, that's all we're getting from this, is that he was around during some pivotal moments. Very, very pivotal moments is quite an understatement, but he lived to 1963. That's like, he lived through Korea as well, the Korean War. So I really, let's just, without any further ado, let's get into it. Let's read it, and let's just see where this novel takes us. This is actually my favorite book, if at least one of my favorite books. I really enjoyed reading this. It kind of fell apart towards the end, and we'll see that when we get there over 15, 16 weeks, something like that. If I stick to the one chapter a week of this. But we'll see. Of course, it's all up to you guys out there, you ladies and gentlemen. If there's support for this, I'll do it. I'll do a lot more. I'll quit my job. YouTube says I need 3,000 watch hours in 1 year, which it doesn't sound like a lot for a long form content. Every episode is 2 hours. So, and let's say I make 50 episodes in a year, that's what I need. I need less than 100 people to watch every episode all the way through, which is really doable. But how many of you are really gonna watch this all the way through, at least on YouTube? I also upload on Spotify. Links in the description. I have that set up already for the one that's scheduled on Tuesday, but links in the description for Spotify. If you're someone like me, it kind of to talk about Wendigoon again. I know I referenced him several times in yesterday's recording because me and my fiance were listening to it because she wanted to get a sneak preview of it. We were listening to it, and I was like, man, you can tell where I get my inspiration from. And I talked about Tim Pool several times as well, but they're important people to me, and I don't think that's a bad thing to reference other creators that I look up to, creators that I would like to be like one day. I would like to be in that position, because they influence people. They influence hearts and minds. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why they're called influencers, eh? But yeah, I don't even know where I was going. Wendigoon, yeah, he has these long-term or long form videos, you know, up to an hour plus. He's talking about interesting stuff, but I'm not one to sit down and like watch a long video like that. I want to put in my earbuds while I'm at work, or while I'm at school, whatever. And I want to listen to it. You know, I don't watch the Matt Walsh show on YouTube. I don't watch Tim Pool on YouTube. I listen to it at work most of the time. So this really long and drawn out way of saying, if you're like that, then link in the description for my Spotify, for this episode on Spotify, and you can go to the page. I'll have that more like streamlined by time the first episode comes out, because it's scheduled on Spotify and YouTube. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm already 12 minutes into this. I'm recording on my phone, so I can see myself. If you see me like looking over there, it's because I'm looking at myself, because I'm beautiful. But we're already 12 minutes in, and I haven't read a single page. Let's just get right into it. If I forgot something, admonish me in the comments below. The word admonish is a reference to Steven Crowder. Again, referencing someone I look up to. Let's start this. There's a lot of cool stuff in this book. A lot of really like fun ideas. Horrifying ideas, but like they're fun to think about. You know, they're fascinating. They're fascinating ideas presented in this book. And I'm excited to share it with you guys. Chapter 1. A squat gray building of only 34 stories. Over the main entrance, the words Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Center. And center is spelt wrong, might I add. It's CENTRE. I'm going to comment on that a lot because he's English. He's British. And in a shield, the world state's motto: community, identity, stability. So we're already getting this image of like, community, identity, stability, like good things, you know, good things on their face. This isn't already as dystopian as you compare it to 1984. Their motto: war is peace, freedom is slavery. The third one, and those are like more on the nose than this. So this is starting, it's the first paragraph. We're starting slowly. Let's see where it takes us. The enormous room on the ground floor faced towards the north, cold for all the summer beyond the panes. For the tropical heat of the room itself, a harsh, thin light glared through the window. Hungrily seeking some draped lay figure, some pallid shape of academic gooseflesh, but finding only the glass and nickel, and bleakly shining porcelain of a laboratory. Laboratory is how you pronounce that word. Wintriness responded to wintriness. The overalls of the workers were white, their hands gloved with a pale, corpse-colored rubber. So again, we're seeing overalls. Was that a big thing back in the like 30s, 20s, whenever this was written? I'm not sure. The light was frozen, dead, a ghost. Only from the yellow barrels of the microscopes did it borrow a certain rich and living substance. Lying along the polished tubes like butter, streak after luscious streak, in long recession down the work tables. So we're in a lab. If that wasn't obvious already, I'll remark upon it. We're in a enormous room, ground floor facing the north. Cold for all the summer beyond the panes, and the tropical heat of the room itself, a harsh thin light glared through the windows. So, I honestly, I can't tell you if it's cold in the room or it's hot in the room. It says the room is hot, but cold for all the summer beyond the panes. Maybe it's saying it's cold beyond the panes, even though it's summer. I can't tell you. We're interpret it as you will. Those of you that have better English comprehension than me. And this, said the director, opening the door, is the fertilizing room. So, when I was first reading this, I didn't know what they were fertilizing. I think some of you might get onto it a little quicker than me, it took me until they explicitly said it for me to start being like, okay. So I want all of you to pay attention to that. What are they fertilizing? What are... I don't want to spoil it too hard, so I'm not going to give too many details, but just keep that note in your head. What are they fertilizing? And the director, we're already kind of getting this authority figure this early on. Bent over their instruments, 300 fertilizers were plunged. As the director of hatcheries and conditioning entered the room in the scarcely breathing silence, the absent-minded soliloquizing hum or whistle of absorbed concentration. A troop of newly arrived students, very young, pink and callow, followed nervously, rather abjectly, at the director's heels. Each of them carried a notebook, in which, whenever the great man spoke, he desperately scribbled, straight from the horse's mouth. It was a rare privilege. The DHC for Central London always made a point of personally conducting his new students around the various departments. So we got this band of students coming and checking out this Department of Hatcheries, right? That's what the DHC is, the director of hatcheries and conditioning. Duh. So we got this guy touring around, and it mentions 300 fertilizers, 300 people in a room working. I guess it mentioned it's an enormous room, but really to think of a lab that's so big that it can accept 300 people working in tandem, we're already far surpassing the squalor of 1984. This is wealth. This is ultimate production, and it's a really neat image. Just that many people fertilizing. Again, what are we fertilizing? Just to give you a general idea, he would explain to them, for of course some sort of general idea they must have if they were to do their work intelligently, though as little of one if they were to be good and happy members of society as possible. For particulars, as everyone knows, make for virtue and happiness. Generalities are intellectually necessary evils. Not philosophers, but fret sawyers and stamp collectors compose the backbone of society. So it's not philosophers, but it's fret sawyer, whatever a fret sawyer is, and stamp collectors are the backbone of society. So we're already getting this image of like unity, you know, which I'm trying to like decipher the book based on what we're reading and not based on what I've already read. So I like to think we're already getting this kind of weird sense of like duty, of do what you must do, because they mention generalities are an evil. It's evil to generalize, but specificity is where happiness comes from, is where virtue comes from. And the mention that stamp collectors compose the backbone of society because they're so focused on the particulars, and it's not philosophers where they're like these general sweeping ideas about life, about a whole thing. I imagine wherever this quotation is coming from, whoever says that would agree that, like, I don't know, a science teacher is less important than a physics teacher, because physics is more specific of a science than just general science. So yeah, all these people working on specific tasks. Also, you could generally glean from that. Tomorrow, he would add, smiling at them with a slightly menacing geniality, you'll be settling down to serious work. You won't have time for generalities. Meanwhile, it was a privilege, straight from the horse's mouth into the notebook. The boys scribbled like mad. So I think I see where he's coming from, you know. Generalities, that's kind of a privilege you have while you're learning, while you don't really know what's up. It's like me, I generally know how to wire a house, but I'm in school to learn the specifics of how do I put in a three-way switch, how do I wire, how should I, what are common practices for like a 15 amp circuit versus a 20 amp circuit, and then, you know, greater industrial things. What do I do with a big motor, a big industrial grade motor, and how do I wire up the capacitors to that, to, you know, this the concept that you should know things generally before you start to specify that's not a weird thing at all. Wow. Tall and rather thin, but upright, the director advanced into the room. He had a long chin and big, rather prominent teeth, just covered when he was not talking by his full, floridly curved lips. Old, young, 30, 50, 55? It was hard to say. And anyhow, the questions didn't arise. In this year of stability, AF 632, it didn't occur to you to ask it. Year of stability. Now we're getting into something that's actually weird, that actually couldn't occur in our real world. Well, not couldn't, but isn't occurring in our current world, right? Because, you know, there are labs, and like, yeah, there's probably a lab somewhere with like 300 people, and they're doing chemical work or research or whatever needs to be done. Manufacturing, I don't know if you would consider like biological things like manufacturing genetically modified stuff, but I can imagine that going on. Yeah, and there's probably a director, and there were probably like college students coming in and, you know, checking it out, be like, hey, what's up with this, like, what's the day in the life of a lab worker like? But then we're getting into year of stability. AF 632. AF obviously echoing like AD, after death. And of course, having read it already, I know AF means after Ford. It never explicitly stated in this book, but I always presumed the Ford they talk of is Henry Ford. I think that's his first name anyway. The inventor of Ford Motor Company, the inventor of the assembly line process. And the reason I think that is because this society really has like assembly line down to the very minutia of society. Everything is assembly lined, everything is streamlined. As with these dystopian novels, there's a strong sense of order. And we are 632 years after Ford. I think Ford was in like the 1920s, so that would put us around 2500 AD, which I'll let you read and see if that's a plausible year because of the like technological things. It just seems like nah, this should be like 2100 at the latest, but besides the point. Year of stability? Of stability. Again, we see stability, and that's fascinating because when you remove freedom, you do get a lot of stability. And that's all I'm gonna say about this for now. Let's just go back to the reading before I spoil everything. I shall begin at the beginning, said the DHC, and the more zealous students recorded his intention in their notebooks. Begin at the beginning. So they're writing down everything this guy says. It's like they're idolizing him. Everything that comes out this dude's mouth is bond. Word is bond. These, he waved his hand, are the incubators. So we've seen the fertilizers, now we're getting into incubators. And opening an insulated door, he showed them racks upon racks of numbered test tubes. The week's supply of ova. Kept, he explained, at blood heat, whereas the male gametes, and here he opened another door, they have to be kept at 35 instead of 37. Full blood heat sterilizes. Rams wrapped in thermogene beget no lambs. Rams wrapped in thermogene beget no lambs. What do we think about that? I think later in the book we talk more about conditioning. I think that might be one of the phrases they use to condition with, based on how it's just put in here, like it's something that's said. Rams wrapped in thermogene beget no lambs. I think it might almost be like a don't count your chickens before they hatch kind of thing. Or it's like there will never be fruit from that tree will never bear fruit kind of phrase, kind of idiomatic expression, figurative language that would be used in this society. And I think that's just kind of neat to think about. So I think what I thought when I first read this line was, oh, they're breeding rams. They're making like a genetically perfect like lamb? Is lamb meat is that equivalent to their pork or chicken or beef? I don't know why pork was the first thing that came out of my mouth. I don't like pork. But so rams wrapped in thermogene beget no lambs. That's just something to chew on. And talking about how they have ova, which is eggs. That's what you call a mammal's eggs. So we're confirmedly working with mammals. I actually don't know. Maybe snakes have ova. Maybe birds have ova. I don't know. But I know we're talking about a mammal. Still leaning against the incubators he gave them, while the pencils scurried illegibly across the pages, a brief description of the modern fertilizing process spoke first, of course, of its surgical introduction. The operation undergone voluntarily for the good of society, not to mention the fact that it carries a bonus amounting to 6 months. So, this is where the seeds of doubt that it's lambs is starting to be sowed. Who are we giving these 6 months salaries to? What is surgical about this? The good of society? What are we talking about? Amounting to 6 months salary, continued with some account of the technique for preserving the excised ovary alive and actively developing, passed on to a consideration of optimum temperature, salinity, viscosity, referred to the liquor in which the detached and ripened eggs were kept, and leading his charges to the work tables, actually showed them how this liquor was drawn off from the test tubes, how it was let out drop by drop onto the specially warmed slides of the microscopes, how the eggs which it contained were inspected for abnormalities, counted and transferred to a porous receptacle, how, and he now took them to watch the operation, this receptacle was immersed in a warm bouillon containing free-swimming spermatozoa at a minimum concentration of 100 per cubic centimeter, he insisted, and how, after 10 minutes, the container was lifted out of the liquor and its contents re-examined, how, if any of the eggs remained unfertilized, it was again immersed, and, if necessary, yet again. How the fertilized ova went back to the incubators, where the alphas and betas remained until definitely bottled, while the gammas, deltas, and epsilons were brought out again, after only 36 hours, to undergo Bokanovsky's process. I'm going to pronounce Bokanovsky, Bakanovsky. I'm going to pronounce it like 100 different ways, just like I was pronouncing Goldstein, a couple different ways in 1984. So we start to get the inklings of alphas, betas, gammas, and epsilons, and deltas, and that's kind of like a mind freak. Later on, it's kind of like it's something to think about. Duh, we're reading. Everything you read is something to think about. You should always be thinking about what you're reading. But it's just another layer on the dystopian thing. I'll give a little like forward on that. The alphas, betas, deltas, gammas, epsilons, those are classes of people. This is a caste-based society, and they represent like different levels of development. So it mentioned how alphas and betas remained until they were bottled. Gammas, deltas, and epsilons were brought out again. They're doing certain things during the fertilization, incubation, during this process to make them of different levels of mental maturity, essentially, so they can do different tasks in the world. And I realize I just gave away what they're fertilizing. They're making people. They're making people. Okay, they're making people. So, with that in mind, maybe I should have told you that so it's a little less confusing, but they're making people. If you didn't get there yet, they're making people. Now we're going to start talking about Bokanovsky's process, which is also cool. It's a cool thing to think about, and it's like, is that possible in the real world? If it is it ethical? So there are a lot of ethical questions in this first chapter. The first chapter is kind of bland, because I think we stay in the lab for the whole first chapter, but bland, but so much to chew on at the same time. Bokanovsky's process, repeated the director, and the students underlined the words in their little notebooks. 1 egg, 1 embryo, 1 adult. Normality. But a Bokanovskified egg will bud, will proliferate, will divide. From 8 to 96 buds, and every bud will grow into a perfectly formed embryo, and every embryo into a full-sized adult, making 96 human beings grow where only one grew before. Progress. Essentially, the DHC concluded, Bokanovskification consists of a series of arrests of development. We check the normal growth, and paradoxically enough, the egg responds by budding. And I think that sentence is so cool, because we check the normal growth, and paradoxically enough, the egg responds to budding. That is this book's equivalent to the Jurassic Park life finds a way. By what he means by checking the normal growth, he's not like looking at the normal growth. No, he's like checking it. He's like I think one of the examples is you shock, like electrocute the embryo, or like you make it really cold, or you put a bunch of alcohol in it, or you expose it to something that's not good for it, and then instead of dying, it buds off and creates another perfectly formed embryo. And I apart from the ethical question of that, I think that's a cool concept, because it implies human sovereignty. It implies that humans are resilient, and life in general is resilient, and it's just so cool. Responds by budding. The pencils were busy. He pointed. On a very slowly moving band, a rack full of test tubes was entering a large metal box. Another rack full was emerging. Machinery faintly purred. It took 8 minutes for the tubes to go through, he told them. 8 minutes of hard X-rays, being about as much as an egg can stand. A few died. Of the rest, the least susceptible divided into 2. Most put out 4 buds. Some 8. All were returned to the incubation, where the buds began to develop. Then, after 2 days, were suddenly chilled and checked. 2, 4, 8. The buds, in their turn, budded, and having budded, were dosed almost to death with alcohol, consequently burgeoned again, and having budded, bud out of bud out of bud, were thereafter, further arrest being generally fatal, left to develop in peace, by which time the original egg was in a fair way to becoming anything from 8 to 96 embryos. A prodigious improvement, you will agree, on nature. Identical twins, but not in piddling 2s and 3s, as in the old viviparous days, when an egg would sometimes accidentally divide. Actually dozens, by scores at a time. So viviparous means, like, you know, like actual birth by intercourse, per conception by intercourse. So we're saying those are the old days, the viviparous days, because we can get a lot more people out of, you know, shooting them with x-rays, filling them with alcohol, chilling them so far that they almost die, and some do die. And again, ethical question, you know, is it moral to kill a human, because you're killing people? But if you kill one person but it makes 2 people, is it just? So it's a trolley equation. That's what it is. It's a trolley problem, but on a massive scale, and it's just like these people's job is a trolley problem. Scores, the director repeated, and flung out his arms as though he were distributing largesse. I don't know what largesse is, don't ask me. Scores. But one of the students was fool enough to ask where the advantage lay. Where does the advantage lay? My good boy, the director wheeled sharply round on him. Can't you see? Can't you see? He raised a hand. His expression was solemn. Bakhanovsky's process is one of the major instruments of social stability. Because you can reliably make lots of people. That's stability, right? Major instruments of social stability. And that's in like italics because they're writing it down in their notebooks. He's trying to tell us that these students are taking notes. They're being good students, unlike some of us who have skipped like 20 days in the past 2 months. Standard men and women in uniform batches, the whole of a small factory staffed with the products of a single Bolkonovskified egg. So we're getting a single Bolkonovskified egg supplying labor to one facility. I think that's another idea that's really cool. Is just the implications for again the like supply line. What was the manufacturing, Henry Ford chain, mass manufacturing, whatever. The implications for chain production. I'm gonna say chain production, because I don't know. I forgot the term. But so the implications for that, if everyone is so genetically similar, so identical, and like, do they have a better understanding of each other? Is there a better like communication? Is it just more efficient? It does raise a question that I haven't thought about earlier. Is that in this book, you know, free sex everywhere. Everyone has sex all the time, and that's like their religious thing is sex. They're related. They're all brother and sister, basically. So how does that play? They're not having kids that way. So this is dystopian. It's supposed to be weird. I can't wait to get to the descriptions of it. Oh gosh, they're terrible. But it's so good. In a bad way. So, a small factory staffed with the products of a single Bolkonovskified egg. 96 identical twins working 96 identical machines. The voice was almost tremulous with enthusiasm. You really know where you are, for the first time in history. He quoted the planetary motto. Community, identity, stability. Grand words. If we could Bolkonovskify indefinitely, the whole problem would be solved. So basically it's saying if we can make everyone in the world a twin, but for some reason That's what kind of like confused me about this, is that you can't, like, so there's the original ova, and then like you butt it into like 2 to 8. Why can't you do that again and again? Why can you not do it indefinitely? Like, well, it's science fiction, you know. There's always going to be like that rules for storytelling's sake, but that did kind of be like, why? What is the like mechanism? Maybe I'm thinking too far into it. Solved by standard gammas, unvarying deltas, uniform epsilons, millions of identical twins. The principle of mass production at last applied to biology. So again, mass production is just coming out when this guy wrote his book. So he's like, what are implications? What are the implications of this? How can this be used for evil? And he hit the nail on the head right here. It's such a fun and terrible idea. So fun. But alas, the director shook his head. We can't Volkanovskify indefinitely. 96 seemed to be the limit. 72 was a good average. From the same ovary and with gametes of the same male to manufacture as many batches of identical twins as possible, that was the best. Sadly, a second best that they could do. And even that was difficult. For in nature, it takes 30 years for 200 eggs to reach maturity. But our business is to stabilize the population at this moment, here and now. Dribbling out twins over a quarter of a century, what would be the use of that? So again, mass production, it's all about just getting out as much as possible. And there was a line in here somewhere that it was difficult to get to 96, and that's all they could get to. I'm kind of wondering in my head now, do they mean difficult in the sense that it's difficult to research to get there? Or is it difficult in the sense that the actual process is still difficult to do? I don't imagine it's the latter, because they have huge factories doing it all the time. That's just fascinating to get to. Dribbling out twins over a quarter of a century. The normal thing is bad. You know, nature is bad, is what he's saying. So there's kind of like a commentary here on that Henry Ford's assembly line. That's what it's called, assembly line manufacturing. That the assembly line is the wrong way to do it. And you can kind of think of that because every person is doing just one thing, just a specialized and specific thing. Whereas before it was like you have to have an artisan doing everything, you know. One guy made every part. And now you have, starting back with, I think it was like Eli Whitney, who made the cotton gin, and I think he also did interchangeable parts. That it kind of brings the soul and the personality out of something you're buying. But on the other hand, those are items. Those are objects. They're not people. So I don't mean to critique Huxley's intelligence. This is a fascinating concept. What if it was applied to people? I think that's what he's going for. What if it was applied to people and not just objects? Food for thought. Obviously, no use at all. No use at all in the 200 eggs over the quarter of a century. Obviously no use at all. But Podsnap's technique had immensely accelerated the process of ripening. They could make sure of at least 150 mature eggs within 2 years. Fertilize and Volkanovskify. In other words, multiply by 72, and you get an average of nearly 11,000 brothers and sisters in 150 batches of identical twins, all within 2 years of the same age. So don't ask me how they're getting to that number. Because they're all brothers and sisters. Okay, I guess you can get multiple eggs from a person and multiple sperms. They're not all twins. So, okay. Yeah. And in exceptional cases, we can make one ovary yield us over 15,000 adult individuals. One ovary, so one like egg production facility in the female body. Okay. So yeah, brothers and sisters, they're not all going to be twins. It'd be if one egg made all of them, but you can't buckanovskify indefinitely. We've already been over that. So, my own confusion just been solved. Beckoning to a fair-haired, ruddy young man who happened to be passing at the moment. Mr. Foster, he called. The ruddy young man... Is it Ruddy or Rudy? I don't know. I want to say Ruddy. The ruddy young man approached. Can you tell us the record for a single ovary, Mr. Foster? This is the director asking him. 16,012 in this center, Mr. Foster replied without hesitation. He spoke very quickly, had a vivacious blue eye, and took an evident pleasure in quoting figures. 16,012 in 189 batches of identicals. But of course they've done much better, he rattled on. In some of the tropical centers, Singapore has often produced over 16,500, and Mombasa has actually touched the 17,000 mark. But then they have unfair advantages. You should see the way a Negro ovary responds to pituitary. I wonder if you can say Negro on YouTube. I wonder if people are gonna think I'm a bad guy for saying Negro. Not a bad word. Steven Crowder used to say it. I remember he had the whole he gave a whole spiel about how that was like a polite word for black folk. I say much worse in my personal life, so I'm not disturbed by it. But if YouTube is disturbed with Negro, then I might not say it. But again, we're getting hints that there's like an international effort to assembly line humans from Mombasa probably, to Singapore, to somewhere else. Singapore, no, just that's all he referenced. To tropical centers. I imagined. Why is my watch going off? We're good, guys. I don't. It does that sometimes. I don't know how I set it, and I don't know how I turned it off. I must just bump the buttons every now and then. But anyway, so we have these centers all across the world, pretty much dedicated to making a lot of people. And it's fascinating. You should see the way a Negro ovary responds to pituitary. It's quite astonishing when you're used to working with European material. Still, he added with a laugh, but the light of combat was in his eyes and the lift of his chin was challenging. Still, we mean to beat them if we can. I'm working on a wonderful Delta Minus ovary at this moment. Only just 18 months old. Over 12,700 children already, either decanted or in embryo, and still going strong. We'll beat them yet. So this guy really likes his job of making people, and he really wants to make as many people as he wants. Sounds like a Catholic. Sounds like me. I want to make as many kids as I want, but the normal way. And he mentioned them being decanted. That means born. They're born. People don't get born in this world. They get decanted from a test tube. Figured I should give that context. It probably will, like, very soon. That's the spirit I like, cried the director, and clapped Mr. Foster on the shoulder. Come along with us and give these boys the benefit of your expert knowledge. So, the director likes Mr. Foster. That's good. Mr. Foster might get a promotion. Who knows? I know. He doesn't. But maybe he deserves one. Mr. Foster smiled modestly. With pleasure. They went. In the bottling room, all was harmonious bustle and ordered activity. I've never just seen bustle used. It's always like hustle and bustle. But no, we got bustle here. Flaps of fresh sow's peritoneum, ready cut to the proper size, came shooting up in little lifts from the organ store in the sub-basement. Whiz, and then click. The lift hatches flew open. The bottle liner had only to reach out a hand, take the flap, insert, smooth down, and before the lined bottle had had time to travel out of reach along the endless band, whiz, click. Another flap of peritoneum had shot up from the depths, ready to be slipped into yet another bottle. The next of that slow, interminable procession on that band. So basically a really slow conveyor belt going on. They're putting sow. That's a pig, right? Pig womb maybe is what a peritoneum is. Is that that's not the same as the placenta, but maybe that's not how they get nutrient to the embryo. And the organ store is such a cool name. I want to work at the organ store, you know. Sounds like something an orc would work at, man. It's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun name. But just this image of, because I'm imagining like rows and rows of conveyor belts of embryos and test tubes and a bunch of people who look basically the same, just putting. I'm basically imagining like liver meat. Is kind of what I'm thinking of, just stuffing it in test tubes. It's such a freaky image because they don't know what they're doing is wrong. They've lived this whole life like that. Next to the liners stood the matriculators. Don't ask me what that means. The procession advanced. One by one, the eggs were transferred from their test tubes to the larger containers. Deftly, the peritoneal lining was... What was it? The peritoneal lining was slit, the morula dropped into place, the saline solution poured in, and already the bottle had passed. And it was the turn of the labelers. Heredity, date of fertilization, membership of Bokanovsky Group, details were transferred from test tube to bottle. No longer anonymous, but named, identified. The procession marched slowly on through an opening in the wall, slowly into the social predestination room. That's something I kind of missed when I was reading it the first time, is that they're transferring them from test tubes to bottles when they get too big. I guess I kind of just... Because I was thinking, how do they get babies to grow in test tubes completely in this book? Like, a baby doesn't fit in a test tube, obviously. They transfer them to bottles. And I imagine there's something that comes after the bottle, or maybe it's just a big bottle. I don't know. So, that was kind of an oversight on my part. But, so you just have all these people transferring babies into bottles and then labeling them. So maybe that is their last destination if it's being labeled. But just again, it's like it's a product. It's such a creepy like image. And the creepiest thing is that they don't know that what they're doing has any moral affliction, any moral doing, there's nothing to do with morality. I'm just making a baby. Like, if I'm working at a car factory, it's like, dude, I'm making a car. Why do you have a problem with the way I make a car? You know, it ain't that big of a deal. I'm making a car. But making a baby in such an unnatural process, it's freaky, man. "88 cubic meters of card index," said Mr. Foster. Did I finish this? I don't think I finished it. Yeah, no longer anonymous, but named, identified. The procession marched slowly on through an opening in the wall, slowly into the social predestination room. If I hadn't read that already, social predestination room. I'm not gonna say too much about it. I want y'all to think about the meaning of that social predestination room. It's probably what you think it is. It's fascinating. It's what it is. 88 "Cubic meters of card index," said Mr. Foster with relish as they entered. "Containing all the relevant information," added the director. "Brought up to date every morning, and coordinated every afternoon, on the basis of which they made their calculations. So many individuals of such and such quality," said Mr. Foster. "Distributed in such and such quantities. The optimum decanting rate at any given moment. Unforeseen wastages promptly made good." "Promptly," repeated Mr. Foster. "If you knew the amount of overtime I had to put in after the last Japanese earthquake." He laughed good-humoredly and shook his head. "The predestinators send in their figures to the fertilizers, who give them the embryos they ask for, and the bottles come in here to be predestined in detail, after which they are sent down to the embryo store, where we now proceed ourselves." So, there's a lot of information there, and the first thing that kind of stands out to me is card index. Card index. So this is before like personal computers and like a PDA, even like a cell phone. You could store all that data so much better in today's world. I will say that I love reading old sci-fi because like you have that complicated of a process. No, just get a nightmare brick, dude. It's like some things in sci-fi are like, oh, I wish we had that in the real world. But then some things in sci-fi are like, I'm happy I've got what we've got. What we have is more efficient. So, essentially what they're saying is the social predestinators it's like a different department from the like embryo, the baby making facility. The social predestinators, they're gonna be like, hey, I need 8 embryos to make into a construction worker, because I'm revealing it to you now. Social predestination, they're predestining you for certain jobs, and it's where the conditioning starts to come in that I mentioned earlier. And opening a door, Mr. Foster led the way down a staircase into the basement. The temperature was still tropical. They descended into a thickening twilight. 2 doors and a passage with a double turn ensured the cellar against any possible infiltration of the day. So it's kind of like a dark room in at my, I don't know how much I should give away about like where I go to school, but at my career center, at my technical building that I go to, I want to be an electrician. I go to the Energy Academy, right? And it's a old middle school building, and we're in the old photography room. So in the back of the room, we use it now as like our lockdown room. So if there's ever like a lockdown drill, we go in there. But there's an old development room for old film. It's a long, dark hallway that curves around so no light can get out. And that's kind of what we got going on here. We have, so it's tropical, really hot and humid, but dark too. 2 doors and a passage with a double turn ensured the cellar against any possible infiltrations of the day. So it's dark in there. It's a dark room for embryos. Embryos are like, yeah, I just spent all this time explaining it, and he's going to explain it now. Embryos are like photograph film, said Mr. Foster waggishly as he pushed open the second door. They can only stand red light. I don't know how much of that is true, because embryos are people. Like I don't know. It's a fun thought though. And in effect, the sultry darkness into which the students now followed him was visible and crimson, like the darkness of closed eyes on a summer's afternoon. The bulging flanks of row on receding row and tier above tier of bottles glinted with innumerable rubies, and among the rubies moved the dim red specters of men and women with purple eyes and all the symptoms of lupus. The hum and rattle of machinery faintly stirred the air. So we have like these sickly people. They're like mole people is kind of what I imagine, working in the dark room. They have purple eyes and they look like they have lupus. And the glistening rubies is obviously maybe not obviously, maybe I'm just interpreting this, but it's the embryos, it's the babies. Give them a few figures, Mr. Foster, said the director, who was tired of talking. I'd be tired too if I lived in this world. Mr. Foster was only too happy to give them a few figures. 220 meters long, 200 wide, 10 high. He pointed 10 meters. 10 meters is like more. I think a meter's less than a yard. I don't know. It's about 300 feet. That's tall. That's a tall building. Tall room, ain't it? 3 tiers of racks. Ground floor level, first gallery, second gallery. So there's only 3 tiers of racks, but in a 300 foot room. I don't know. Maybe I'm imaging it wrong. Maybe each like tier has rows going up and up. But you have a lot of vertical space. Why are you not using it all? I never got the image down right for this. There's a lot of imagery. You know, like I never was able to put it all together. Maybe I'm just The spidery steelwork of gallery above gallery faded away in all directions into the dark. Near them, 3 red ghosts were busily unloading demijohns from a moving staircase. I can't tell you what demijohn means. I hope they explain it. The escalator from the social predestination room. Wait, from the predestination room? Demijohns from unloading demijohns. I thought we were going. Maybe we're still going to the predestination room, and that's not what this dark room is. I don't know. So we got each bottle could be placed on one of 15 racks. Each rack, though you couldn't see it, was a conveyor traveling at the rate of 33 1/3 centimeters an hour. 267 days at 8 meters a day. 2,136 meters in all. 1 circuit of the cellar at ground level, 1 on the first gallery, half on the second, and on the 267th morning, daylight in the decanting room. Independent existence, so called. So basically, why are we having them move on the conveyor belt? It's because the assembly line just came out, and he wants to include conveyor belts in it. I think what would be more efficient is just you put the embryos on a shelf for that amount of time. Maybe no, it's because this is so much more precise. Because a person can take it off the shelf like this, or he can take it off the shelf like that, and then you're messing up with the time that it takes for the embryos to get out of there, and so assembly line process. It's very, very fine-tuned and precise. 33 1/3 centimeters per hour until it's time for them to be birthed, decanted. Independent existence. But in the interval, Mr. Foster concluded, we've managed to do a lot to them. Oh, a very great deal. His laugh was knowing and triumphant. So we're still doing things to them in the dark room. They're not just developing. Mr. Foster duly told them. Oh, I skipped an entire paragraph. His laugh was knowing and triumphant. That's the spirit I like, said the director. Once more. Let's walk around. You tell them everything, Mr. Foster. Mr. Foster duly told them. Told them of the growing embryo on its bed of peritoneum. Made them taste the rich blood surrogate on which it fed. Gross. I would not taste a baby's rich blood surrogate. I know some people like eat the placenta. I would don't do that. Told them of the growing embryo on its bed of peritoneum, made them taste the rich blood circuit on which it fed, explained why it had to be stimulated with placentin and thyroxine, told them of the corpus luteum extract, showed them the jets through which at every 12th meter from 0 to 2040 it was automatically injected, spoke of those gradually increasing doses of pituitary administered during the final 96 meters of their course, described the artificial maternal circulation installed in every bottle at meter 112, showed them the reservoir of blood surrogate, the centrifugal pump that kept the liquid moving over the placenta and drove it through the synthetic lung and waste product filter, referred to the embryo's troublesome tendency to anemia, to the massive doses of hog's stomach extract and fetal foal's liver, with which, in consequence, it had to be supplied. There's a lot there, and it really makes me question, how much did Huxley research? How much does he actually know about genetic information and how babies are made? How much of it is just BS? How much is he just making up this anemia, or is it and some of the scientific words that are being used? I couldn't have made it up like this. It's just such great detail about something so inconsequential. And I love that so much. The amount of detail and the imagery. They're really building this world. It almost reads like a manual on how to do this. And I think that adds to the universe in a way. Showed them the simple mechanisms by means of which, during the last 2 meters out of every 8, all the embryos were simultaneously shaken into familiarity with movement. Hinted at the gravity of the so-called trauma of decanting, and enumerated the precautions taken to minimize, by a suitable training of the bottled embryo, that dangerous shock. Told them of the test for sex carried out in the neighborhood of meter 200. Explained the system of labeling, a T for the males, a circle for the females, and for those who were destined to become free martins, a question mark, black on a white ground. What's a free martin? I'm glad you asked. I think he's going to elaborate. So let's just keep reading. For of course, said Mr. Foster, in the vast majority of cases, fertility is merely a nuisance. 1 fertile ovary in 1200. That would really be quite sufficient for our purposes. But we want to have a good choice. And of course, one must always have an enormous margin of safety. So we allow as many as 30% of the female embryos to develop normally. The others get a dose of male sex hormone every 24 meters for the rest of the course. Result, they're decanted as free martins. Structurally quite normal, except, he had to admit, that they do have the slightest tendency to grow beards, but sterile. Guaranteed sterile. Which brings us at last, continued Mr. Foster, out of the realm of mere slavish imitation of nature into the much more interesting world of human invention. I will admit this is much more interesting. A free martin, just being sterilized from birth. You didn't have a choice in it. Someone in a lab said this is one of the 70% of females that we're going to sterilize. That's most. Obviously, 70% is most. Most females are sterile. So they don't even have the option ever of rebelling and making their own kids. But then 30% aren't sterile. So what was it, 1 in 1200? There's a big leap from 1 in 1200 to a third. Even to a quarter, which would be 5% less. That's really something to chew on, just the level of sterility. And we're kind of getting that in our society, not through genetic modification of you while you're in utero. Obviously, I don't think you could call these people in utero. They're in test tubero. But we are being like sterilized as a population. They found microplastic in a guy's testicles, and microplastics have been proven to act as like endocrine disruptors, and they act as a female sex hormone in a number of cases, and it kind of leads to the opposite effect. Not opposite, but on the other side of the spectrum, it sterilizes us men. A little worse that it sterilizes women. It doesn't necessarily sterilize us, but it kind of increases this chance for like developmental defects to a point where it might make you question, should we try to have a kid? Should we try to go through with this process knowing that everything's kind of screwed up and the kid's going to come out retarded? Do we do that? And the answer is yes. God says to be fruitful and multiply, regardless of if the kid is retarded. Do what you want after the kid is born. If you don't want the retard kid, find something to do with it. I don't know what to tell you, man, but you gotta give birth to that retarded kid. But in this world, you don't get the option. You don't get the option. Retarded kids don't exist. I imagine if an embryo is found, that's like, this will be retarded. This one will be retarded. They just kind of throw it away. So again, we're really talking about the left wing here, because they're the ones advocating for the murder of retarded people, which is kind of like the opposite of where the left-wing movement started. But that's a little bit off topic. We're talking about free martins and the much more interesting world of human invention. He rubbed his hands, for of course they didn't content themselves with merely hatching out embryos. Any cow could do that. We also predestine and condition. We decant our babies as socialized human beings, as alphas or epsilons, as future sewage workers or future, he was going to say future world controllers, but correcting himself said future directories of hatcheries instead. So he's being an ass kisser, ain't he? Future directors of hatcheries. So they're choosing your job for you. Where is the freedom? Where is the liberty? In 1984, I had this discussion. I talked about the difference between freedom and liberty, and I'm going to bring that up again. There's no liberty in this world, but there's a lot of freedom. There's a lot of freedom in the worst ways. Liberty, of course, being the freedom to explore righteous virtues, the freedom to do what is right, and freedom being kind of just this milquetoast. Guns, I think everyone should have guns. I bought an AR-15 like 3 days after my 18th birthday, and I love it. It's sitting in my closet. I never use it because ammo is so expensive, and I work like 20 hours a week to pay for my car insurance. So I don't get to shoot anymore. I have 30 rounds in a magazine right now, for in case something bad happens, and I'm not going to use those 30 rounds until I need to, or until I buy more. So, and I'm saying guns are liberty. Guns are an example of liberty. The right to self-defense, that's liberty. Freedom is like the right to do blow and hookers. I don't like freedom. I'm not a freedom guy. I'm a liberty guy. In the Declaration of Independence, they say the right to pursue happiness. In that they're not talking about happiness in the sense that if I take a pill of ecstasy, is ecstasy a pill? I don't know. Again, I'm talking about drugs in one of these videos. I talked about it on Tuesday. And I was like, is this going to get this show demonetized? Which doesn't matter because I'm not monetized to begin with. Is this going to get it age restricted? If it does, boo-hoo. But I'm talking about if I take a pill of ecstasy, I'll be, oh, happy. I'll be joyful. I'll be like, oh, wow. But that's not true happiness, as we know. That's momentary. That's ecstasy is what it is. It's a moment of ecstasy. And what we need to strive for, what we have the right to strive for, we don't have a right to it. We have a right to pursue happiness, which is a relationship with God, a vivid and powerful prayer life. It's charity. It's being generous. It's contributing. Liberty and happiness is contribution to the greater good and to good in general. It's not this concept of I have a lifted truck and AR-15 and I watch porn every Tuesday and then I go buy meth from Daryl on Saturday so I can get through my 120-hour work week or whatever. I don't know. So I don't even know what spurred that conversation. They don't have the liberty to pick their jobs. In America, we have a right to decide on what career path we want to take. We have a right to decide what we want to do in our life. There's no caste saying we can't. You get to choose whatever career path you want to pursue, even if you suck at it. I can pursue being a lawyer. I don't have a right to be a lawyer. I can pursue being a doctor. I don't have a right to be a doctor. But I can look for jobs as a doctor. I can get schooling to be a doctor. That's not closed off to me. But I don't have the right to that happiness. You know, the right to pursue happiness, basically, is what I'm yapping about. Because these people are being predestined for their jobs. You know, future sewage controllers or sewage workers or future directors of hatcheries. The DHC acknowledged the compliment with a smile. Was that meant to be a compliment? Yeah, I think it was, because he's comparing sewage workers as like the bottom tier, which I don't agree with. Sewage workers being the bottom tier, and then future directors of hatcheries is like the top here, because he said alphas and epsilons. There you go. They were passing meter 320 on rack 11. A young beta minus mechanic was busy with screwdriver and spanner on the blood surrogate pump of a passing bottle. Young beta minus mechanic. Okay, so this is an actual guy. I thought for a second we were getting into conditioning right there. The hum of the electric motor deepened by fractions of a tone as he turned the nuts. Down, down, a final twist, a glance at the revolution counter, and he was done. He moved 2 paces down the line and began the same process on the next pump. Reducing the number of revolutions per minute, Mr. Foster explained. The surrogate goes round slower, therefore passes through the lung at longer intervals. Therefore, the embryo gets less oxygen. Nothing like oxygen shortage for keeping an embryo below par. Again, he rubbed his hands. So, I'm wondering if this like beta minus mechanic, if he was conditioned as a infant to like, is he decreasing the revolutions per second by such a precise amount, and does he know it because he can hear that tone decreasing and he's like, this is how I need it to be? Or he's looking at the revolutions counter and okay, I guess it's probably like an RPM thing. It probably has an RPM monitor on it. Tachyometer, I think that's what they're called. Probably just says the number. I'm thinking about it way too deep. But then we're doing that in order to deprive these fetuses, these embryos, of oxygen to keep them below par. I think this is how they make epsilons, the low tier, as I said, basically retarded, low developmental workers, developed to work the crappy jobs no one wants to do and be happy doing it. But why do you want to keep the embryo below par? Asked an ingenious, it either says I think this says ingenuous student, like implying that he's asking it. So like, because Mr. Foster is like trying to goad that out of him. It's kind of like I've asked those questions like, oh, I wonder where this is going, you know, like it's that kind of thing. Ass, said the director, breaking a long silence. Hasn't it occurred to you that an epsilon embryo must have an epsilon environment as well as an epsilon heredity? No, that hasn't occurred to me. I don't know. An epsilon has to have an epsilon environment as well as epsilon heredity. It evidently hadn't occurred to him. He was covered with confusion. That's about the right response. The lower the caste, said Mr. Foster, the shorter the oxygen. The first organ affected was the brain. After that, the skeleton. At 70% of normal oxygen, you got dwarfs. Less than 70, eyeless monsters. It's kind of it's a horrific image, actually, because that means that these scientists, they had to, at some point, experiment with that. Like, how low can we go before it start making absolute creatures? Why did they not stop at dwarfs? One could argue that dwarfism is an extreme life-altering ailment. I say that like it's an illness. It's not. It's a disability, you could say. And then they keep pushing it, and you get eyeless monsters. It's like a trope in modern horror that, like, oh, it had no eyes, or like it had eyes where there shouldn't have been eyes. You know, eyes are, because they're the window to the soul. They're such a spooky thing that, of course, they're always referenced. It's like a trope nowadays. But this, just thinking of eyeless monsters being created in a lab for scientific purposes, it almost makes me think of like the Japanese, I think it's Japanese unit 731, maybe, the World War II era scientific unit that just kind of was like, if we crush a baby with a brick, will it be crushed? Like, okay, yeah, I guess that's science. Who else but the Japanese? And it's funny, he mentioned the Japanese tsunami in here. So the lower the caste, the shorter the oxygen. Eyeless monsters who are of no use at all, concluded Mr. Foster. You sure you can't like condition them to like feel things? Whereas his voice became confidential and eager. If they could discover a technique for shortening the period of maturation, what a triumph, what a benefaction to society. Consider the horse. They considered it. I actually don't know where this is going. So shortening the period of maturation without creating eyeless monsters, I think that's where we're going. So the horse, mature at 6, the elephant at 10. While at 13, a man is not yet sexually mature and is only full grown at 20. Hence, of course, that fruit of delayed development, the human intelligence. So it's saying right here that the longer you develop, the more smarter you is. But in epsilons, said Mr. Foster very justly, we don't need human intelligence. Didn't need and didn't get it. But though the epsilon mind was mature at 10, the epsilon body was not fit to work till 18. long years of superfluous and wasted immaturity. If the physical development could be speeded up till it was as quick, say, as a cow's, what an enormous saving to the community. So basically they're trying to make these, so it's like the mental maturity of a 10-year-old, but they're still not physically ready to work their jobs. Enormous saving to the community. Enormous, murmured the students. Mr. Foster's enthusiasm was infectious. He became rather technical, spoke of the abnormal endocrine coordination which made men grow so slowly, postulated a germinal mutation to account for it. Could the effects of this germinal mutation be undone? Could the individual epsilon embryo be made a revert by a suitable technique to the normality of dogs and cows? That was the problem, and it was all but solved. So, again, we're getting... He mentioned he became rather technical. We're seeing, like, Aldous Huxley's... kind of the beauty of his work, that he's like... he can get so detailed about nothing, about a thing that doesn't exist. And I really like that. And it comes up many times in this book. His ability to do imagery in a very particular way. Pilkington at Mombasa had produced individuals who were sexually mature at 4 and full-grown at 6.5. A scientific triumph, but socially useless. 6-year-old men and women were too stupid to do even epsilon work, and the process was an all or nothing one. Either you failed to modify at all, or else you modified the whole way. They were still trying to find the ideal compromise between adults of 20 and adults of 6. So far without success. Mr. Foster sighed and shook his head. So we're essentially getting the trade-off idea here, is that we can make people develop faster, but they're stupider. You know, it's where are you gonna put your skill points? So that's kind of why they have this caste system. Epsilons develop the fastest, alphas take a little more time, you know, but they get that human intelligence and just better development. Wow, being developed leads to development. Their wanderings through the crimson twilight had brought them to the neighborhood of meter 170 on Rack 9. From this point onwards, Rack 9 was enclosed, and the bottles performed the remainder of their journey in a kind of tunnel, interrupted here and there by openings 2 or 3 meters wide. Heat conditioning, said Mr. Foster. So, again, just basically putting a bunch of babies in an oven. I wonder if that's been tried before. Hot tunnels alternated with cool tunnels. Coolness was wedded to discomfort in the form of hard X-rays. By the time they were decanted, the embryos had a horror of the cold. They were predestined to emigrate to the tropics, to be miners and acetate silk spinners, and steel workers. Later on, their minds would be made to endorse the judgment of their bodies. We condition them to thrive on heat, concluded Mr. Foster. Our colleagues upstairs will teach them to love it. So, I think this is also like the era of Freudianism, of, no, that's Pavlov was conditioning. So they're associating cold with X-rays, with pain. So it's like, so they don't like cold. It said it. They don't like cold. But they didn't do anything positive when they went through the heat, which kind of is interesting to me. I would think you would want to positively... Well, it's positive reinforcement either way because you are adding a stimulus. Negative reinforcement is taking away a stimulus, but there's no sort of like you don't get anything for the heat. You're not associating heat with good. You're associating heat with normal, I guess. But either way, you're definitely conditioning them away from the cold. So our colleagues upstairs will teach them to love it. And that, put in the director sententiously, that is the secret of happiness and virtue. Liking what you've got to do. All conditioning aims at that. Making people like their unescapable social destiny. It's not unescapable, though. If you just never made it, it wouldn't be unescapable. But it is sweet that they're conditioned to enjoy it. I suppose. I wish I was conditioned to enjoy my job. In a gap between two tunnels, a nurse was delicately probing with a long, fine syringe into the gelatinous contents of a passing bottle. The students and their guides stood watching her for a few moments in silence. "Well, Lenina," said Mr. Foster, when at last she withdrew the syringe and straightened herself up. Lenina is an important character. She's I mentioned in Tuesday's episode that this book follows a couple different people throughout it. It's like there's never a hard break. There's never a hard, okay, now we're going to this guy. There's kind of, I love the narration style of this book, the way it just kind of flows from person to person to person. There's no main character in this book. It kind of adds to that, the Unitarianism, the collective of it, the stability, you know, the planetary motto, community. Everyone is one, essentially. Everyone's Bokanovskified, you could say. But we got Lenina. The girl turned with a start. One could see that, for all the lupus and the purple eyes, she was uncommonly pretty. I think a girl with purple eyes would be pretty. So she's a pretty mole person. "Henry," her smile flashed redly at him, a row of coral teeth. Just because we're still in the dark room. "Charming, charming," murmured the director, and, giving her 2 or 3 little pats, received in exchange a rather deferential smile for himself. "What are you giving them?" asked Mr. Foster, making his tone very professional. "Oh, the usual typhoid and sleeping sickness." That's fine. It doesn't say that it's it doesn't explicitly say it's a vaccine, so I like to think she's just giving him typhoid and sleeping sickness, and it's just gonna kill them, and she's a terrorist. Tropical workers start being vaccinated, at meter 150. Mr. Foster explained to the students. The embryos still have gills. That's an artifact. That's an artifact in this book. Because back in this era, before like ultrasound imagery and stuff, they thought that people went through evolutionary stages when they were developing. It's like the idea was that while you're in the womb, you start off as like a bug, and then like you evolve into a fish, and then you evolve into a lizard, and then you evolve into a mammal, and then a person. It's some old like evolutionary. It's not even evolutionary theory. It's like developmental theory. They didn't know, so they think that people have gills. And what do they do about them gills? The embryos still have gills. We immunize the fish against the future man's diseases. So that's one of the things. That was the science of the time. The science of the time was people evolve and then they're born. But we know now that's not how it is. You were always a human. You were never a fish. So they're vaccinating a fish against the future man's diseases. Then, turning back to Lenina, 10 to 5 on the roof this morning. 10 to 5 on the roof this afternoon, he said, as usual. Don't know what that means. Charming, said the director once more, and with a final pat, moved away after the others. On rack 10, rows of next generation's chemical workers were being trained in the toleration of lead, caustic sodas, tar, chlorine. The first of a batch of 250 embryonic rocket plane engineers was just passing the 1100 meter mark on Rack 3. A special mechanism kept their containers in constant rotation to improve their sense of balance, Mr. Foster explained. Doing repairs on the outside of a rocket in mid-air is a ticklish job. You can say that again. We slacken off the circulation when they're right way up so that they're half-starved, and double the flow of surrogate when they're upside down. They learn to associate topsy-turvydom with well-being. In fact, they're only truly happy when they're standing on their heads. So, now we get some of the, like, kind reinforcement, positive reinforcement. That's like, they're adding surrogate, when they're upside down, so that they're happy upside down, and they're basically choking them when they're right side up. So that is so fascinating. And I guess it makes sense. Like, you're only truly happy. Like, your body is only truly comfortable when you're doing your job. Like, you're only physically satisfied when you're at your job. That's like I got wicked joint pain. If my joint pain went away completely when I were to go to work, then I would want to be at work all the time. If my job made me not hurt and be like achy and sore because like I got in a car crash in January, I would be at work right now. I'd find a way. I would have not yelled at my manager so badly the other day because she wasn't doing her job. I would not have gotten fired, possibly, if my job was my pain pill. And now, Mr. Foster went on, I'd like to show you some very interesting conditioning for Alpha Plus intellectuals. We have a big batch of them on Rack 5. First gallery level. He called to two boys who had started to go down to the ground floor. So we're going to start talking about our Alpha Pluses. We only have like half a page left, so how much are we going to talk about them really? But Alpha Pluses, they're like, I think it goes up to like Alpha Plus Plus, and that's like the world controller. But we got Alpha Pluses. What's up with them? They're round about meter 900, he explained. You can't really do any useful intellectual conditioning till the fetuses have lost their tails. So again, I'm like 90% sure that fetuses never grow tails, that humans never develop to have tails in the womb. This book is making me actually doubt that. That's a slight bit. Because again, we develop into monkeys and then we develop into humans, right? That was the previous thinking. So you can only intellectually condition them after they've lost their tails. They ain't monkeys no more. Follow me. But the director had looked at his watch. 10 to 3, he said. No time for the intellectual embryos, I'm afraid. We must go up to the nurseries before the children had finished their afternoon sleep. So, there are children here. It's not just embryos, too. Mr. Foster was disappointed. At least one glance at the decanting room, he pleaded. Very well, then. The director smiled indulgently. Just one glance. And that was the end of chapter 1. So many like cool concepts and ideas are presented in chapter 1. There's so much to like chew on and just think about. A lot of fun concepts. We only got through the fertilization process and the like predestination process. There's not a lick of how are they taken out, how are they conditioned while they're living, which is what's going on in the nurseries. But with what little information we have, there's just so much to unpack and unload. There's just the idea, again, I'm driving this home really hard, the idea of manufacturing people. There are ethical, there's so many ethical like dilemmas there. So many ethical, is it okay? Because the amount of embryos you're throwing away too. They mentioned they're killing them. They're killing them as they check their growth to Bakanovskify them. You are that is destroying human life, because they're already fertilized ova. They're already fertilized things. That's human life. You're destroying them. That's an abortion. But of course they know no evil in that. They don't know that's evil. They don't know they don't know what morality is. They only know what they've been conditioned to think, which I think we get into in chapter 2, which I'm really excited about, because the conditioning stretches out over the whole book. This is laying down a lot of foundation for things that are going to be referenced throughout the book. Makes sense, foundation is when you're born. So, of course, just so many things to chew on. You have this worldwide, government seeking to create perfect people. A lot of perfect people who are, just everyone's a twin, or everyone's related. And is just the stability. Everyone's related because of stability, because that's the most stable thing to do. But later in the book, we know that there's not 100% stability. There's our heroes of the story, which is not a hero's tale. Nothing good happens in this book. No good happens. And 1984 is the same way. No good happens. No progress is made. No stories are concluded, because we're in a dystopia. It's everything is really distressing. But that's where we're leaving it for today. We're gonna get into chapter 2 next Thursday. Show some support for the series if you're loving it. I'm loving doing it. I am actually having a good time sitting here and reading. It's 1:30 in the morning right now. I'm seeing on my computer monitor. I have to get up at 6. But I'm having a fun time sitting here reading to you guys, sharing what I have to think about this book. What do you think? What are you guys thinking about what's going on? The canting and predestination and everything. Comment down below, and I'll definitely make sure to read any comments I get that are genuinely thoughtful and insightful. I know I'm probably not gonna get any comments on these first episodes of the series, and that's fine. But I would love to read and discuss the comments, because that's more for me to comment on. That's more ideas to explore, and that's what I love to do. I love exploring ideas, and this book presents a lot of ideas, and it's so fascinating. And I'm happy I've got the opportunity to do all this for you guys. You're noticing some changes from last episode, of course. I'm kind of improving what's going on. I got the whole video going on, and you can hear the track in the background that repeated every 16 minutes. I think it's a 16-minute track. I AI generated that, and then I recorded it with OBS because I couldn't download the tracks without paying for their premium service. So I don't think there's any copyright on it. I don't know if it saves. I don't know how the AI crap works, man. What's your opinion on AI? Comment down below. Hey, how about that? AI is so cool for small creators like me. I gotta call myself a creator. I'm not a creator. I'm creating stuff on the side. I'm just a guy, man. I'm a dude. When I start making money off this, then I'll say I'm a creator. How about that? But I'm leaving it here. Spotify and Twix is in the descriptions below. I call it Twix because I think Steven Crowder says that. Twitter, X, down below. I'm not active at all on it, but kind of am. So I'm gonna get this up on Thursday. I'm uploading things 3 p.m. Central Time. That's like 4 p.m. if you're in New York or Michigan. Heaven forbid you're in Michigan. Gross. Crazy thing is, I live right next to Michigan. I live right on the border of Michigan, and whenever I'm driving to my fiance's house, because she lives even closer to the border of Michigan. There's billboards advertising marijuana here in Indiana, and I'm like, marijuana is still a Schedule 1 substance. It's illegal in Indiana. How can you advertise it? Why is it not legal here? If we're gonna allow advertising of it, just make it legal. At this point, I heavily understand the concerns of, like, how do you test for it, but either enforce our freaking laws and make it illegal to advertise marijuana here. You can't have a billboard for cigarettes. You can't have a billboard for liquor. Why are we having? I think there are like billboards for whiskeys and stuff. I think I've seen them, but why are we advertising pot in my city, like downtown my city? Not even by the border. There's billboards downtown. It's not good. I would prefer our laws are enforced. I don't want weed to be legal, but if you're letting advertisers come here, then it should be legal. I wonder what it's like as you get like towards Gary. I wonder how the dispensaries are in Illinois, like if they're advertising. I wonder, towards Ohio, if there are advertisers on that side. So I went to West Virginia a few weeks back, and we drove through Ohio. Never saw a sign for cannabis at the entire time we were in Ohio. But granted, I don't know if there's as good of a setup, because Michigan City is right here, and then New Buffalo is like right there, kitty corner to each other. So it's like a 20-minute drive up there to go get your pot. It's so bad because my grandparents have been getting coupons for pot, and I don't get how that's legal, but that's way off any kind of topic. That's my 3 cents for the end of this video. I'm gonna leave it here, guys. Have a great evening, morning, day, whenever you're seeing this. God bless each and every one of you. Thanks for watching. Like the video or dislike it, whatever suits your preference. Just do something, and subscribe if you basically want to tell me you want to return. If this is something worth doing. Comment below. Give me your thoughts. Give me your comments, man. I'll respond. I'll be there. Alright, I'm gonna leave it here. This is going up on Thursday, so happy Thursday, guys. Alright, goodbye. Boop.